All right. Welcome, everyone, to the explained podcast. To see how I didn't stumble in saying the title that time, Renee. Aren't you proud of me?
Mm-hmm. I'm proud of you.
We have a special guest today. We have Dr. James Jed Dobson coming to us from Dartmouth College. He's done a few things, just a few things, written a few things. And I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation about AI and a couple other things. And I think I have to ask you a question about Apollo 11 at some point. Is that correct?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Could you start by kind of a couple things, introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about yourself, but also how do you define AI? What does AI mean when we say it to you?
All right. Yeah, well, let me start just saying a little bit about myself. So I'm an English professor. I have been at Dartmouth for 22, 23 years, something like that, and held a variety of positions over time. I came to Dartmouth as a staff member working in psychological and brain sciences, and before that, I worked in the computer industry. And at some point, I had a bit of a existential vocational crisis and decided I needed to get a PhD in English, but I needed the financial support of continuing to work. So I kept my job at Dartmouth working remotely while I picked up my graduate degree and came back, started teaching while dissertating, and eventually landed on the tenure track, became director of our first year writing program, and most recently, became the special advisor to the provost for AI, which nicely connected lots of my interests, right? And from the writing program perspective, we'd been thinking about AI, generative AI, since at least November 2022, right? I've been parts of a lot of conversations on campus talking about what that means for our required first year writing class. And I've been writing and researching AI, machine learning for a while. I've written on all kinds of things. My dissertation was a study of how technology in the 19th century changed the ways we wrote and thought about ourselves. So I wrote about autobiography in the late 19th century and how that was disrupted by things like the telephone, by the train, by other kinds of technologies that were rapidly changing things at that historical moment. And then moved on from there to write about what we called like the digital humanities, critiquing, thinking about different methods for computational analysis of text and images, and a whole bunch of projects spun off from there. But taking on this role this year at this moment, it's been really interesting. I've been bringing together both my professional career and my academic research field. So that's been pretty exciting, although overwhelming. I'm still the director of our first year writing program. Those were both supposed to be half-time jobs, but they're both pretty much full-time jobs. And been kind of wild this year. I've been saying that my time as the director of our writing program, which I became director in July of 2019. So my very first year was interrupted by the pandemic and the shift to remote instruction. And I ended my first cycle in 2022. So I said it was bookended by crises on other of both directions, or both sides of that initial appointment. You asked me about artificial intelligence, something I've been thinking quite a bit. So I'm at Dartmouth, which is the birthplace of that term. And in my work before this past year, I kind of ignored that conference. I decided there's nothing terribly exciting going on there. I've gone back to some of the materials a little bit and have been trying to think more about it. I mean, there was a sense that the term was inadequate back then, artificial intelligence. There were many other terms proposed, automata studies, right? Machine learning or learning machines was there in the background. In more applied ways, pattern matching was certainly part of that conversation as well. I think artificial intelligence is intentionally what trained as a literary scholar here. Theorist, I would say, is a floating signifier. It intentionally is not grounded or attached to anything. It can't be for a couple of reasons, right? The artificial structuring the binary relationship with the natural in ways that we don't quite understand. Intelligence, something we can't quite define. It's a floating signifier that has had a lot of value for explaining, marketing, creating hype around the technologies at different moments. It's always going to fail in some way. It kind of needs to, because the project of artificial intelligence is this thing that will happen at some point, maybe in the future, right? To deliver on the promises made. So it's kind of set up in a relationship of constant, at every moment, not living up to its promise. But it will someday, by being detached, right, from actual everyday products and concerns. It causes a lot of damage, I think.
Do you think that attachment that you're talking about, we've talked about this, and Sean actually made a funny kind of editorial image the other day of people are humanizing AI. Some people are. Some people are associating a human aspect to it. And you talk about this attachment to this idea that AI is taking on emotion, AI is taking on things, but you're talking about keeping that quite separate as a way of approaching the question of AI. And my other kind of caveat to that is, you mentioned that you're a literary scholar. So how does that mentality really help you approach all of this thinking about AI? And I do, all of us can relate to the other duties as assigned. So it's kind of interesting that you've got this, writing and literary component, and now combining that with this advisory post around AI. Is just, how are you approaching that, and how are you separating the concepts within those areas?
Yeah, those are all great questions. I'm troubled by the way lots of people use AI in a non-referential way. I think my argument is it needs to be, not that it should be, but it needs to be for artificial intelligence to function as a label. It needs to not be detached to specific references, and I'm criticizing that. I think that's a problem. So when someone says ask an AI, the AI did this, returned this thing, answered in this way, I'm always asking for, greater specificity. Did you mean you used an application called ChatGPT? Do you mean that you used a specific model available from OpenAI? Do you mean that you saw this result in a Google search? Like, where is this AI thing, right? I think it's curious that a number of people will say, and I catch myself, of course, caught up in some of those logics sometimes, but my car's detecting other vehicles on the road. I don't say, oh, my AI in the car. It's we've got a different way of referring to what's essentially a very similar technology. It's not generative, thank God. Who knows what kind of then, but I think it's a really interesting moment in thinking about generative AI. It's like it reinvigorated people in the humanities to start thinking about how we might see large language models as sort of operationalized theory, that they're doing something. They're modeling language in a way that theorists and researchers had tried to do it in earlier historical moments in the 80s and 90s, and you can go back to the 70s. In some of these fields in linguistics. So they're really exciting objects for allowing us to think about the modeling of language, and wow, so much is being built on language, right, with these models. So I see that as a really exciting interdisciplinary area. I find myself in lots of different contexts. I go to many different departments and programs at Dartmouth. I'm talking with lots of different researchers who are, certainly not humanists, but I think a number of them share the similar concerns that humanists have. I gave a guest lecture in a computer science class at the beginning of this week, and it was a class about AI in healthcare. And I came in, gave a talk about early history of machine learning and artificial intelligence, and how I think some of the problems of that earlier moment are still with us. Some of the issues raised then still bear on the present. And the students in that class were all deeply concerned about privacy implications, right? About disparate outcomes for patients and the systems that they might build or think about building or analyzing. So I think the humanities has real opportunity here to help bring together different perspectives, talk about creativity right now, what it means, how we might augment it with generative AI, how it might, machine assisted creativity might not be creativity. Maybe it is. There's like limits on that. What are the intellectual property legal issues? I try to bring that framing in. I mean, I think of myself as squarely located in the liberal arts. So.
Yeah. I've been kind of struggling with the idea of, because I really enjoy making like generative AI, like I don't even know if I want to call it art, but like products and like, it's not products either, but I make stuff, and I to me it has value. And it feels like something other than like the term I keep hearing is like AI slop or generative AI slop, and I'm wondering like what your perspective is on that, like how at what point like is it like do I have to be really thoughtful about like what has to go into it being like an art, like what might be considered art, or a product that means something. I'm trying to get at a question here. I don't know if anyone can help me out, bail me out here before I derail the whole thing.
No, I think you're onto it. It's a question of value, right? And one of the things that we talk about, Jed, is we're experiencing educators who we're trying to show ways to use AI in a way that is efficient, works towards efficiencies. Educators don't have a lot of time, so there's some things that it's a-okay to use AI for that aren't of moral or ethical value, right? They're just task oriented. And yet what we find is that our identities are so wrapped up in effort and time that there's what we're calling right now for the moment cognitive lift guilt. So when something that has in the past traditionally taken us a lot of effort and a lot of time is done quickly, we feel a sense of loss or that, and we don't know what to do with that. There's a sense of cheating or doing something lightly. And what Sean's getting at is that I think there's the same question in art and creativity of, I'm creating something, I'm putting some effort into it, and the outcome is interesting, but Sean may be sensing that it has inherently less value in some way or less worth because it is not from him to paper or from him to whatever medium. And you had mentioned something about that as well. Is that what you're getting at, Sean?
Yeah, like just for example, I can't draw or anything, but I have ideas for like political cartoons, and now like with the recent like update to Sora, I can make that come out almost the way I'm imagining it. And but somehow it still feels like a little cheap, or like, because I know that the model is taking what it has absorbed and just kind of recreating it.
These are all really interesting points and things I think a lot about in this space, right? The question about the value of the objects, the offloading of work or labor, the ways in which we want to assign value to the outputs of our work with generative AI are all like really the fundamental questions. I think when I chat with our students, I hear them feeling guilt. I mean, they're all little Protestants or something right now. They feel guilt if they use it, and they feel guilt if they don't. Right? If they're not using it, then they're giving themselves a disadvantage compared to their peers who are all going to be using it. And when they're stacked up against each other, if their papers filled with errors, right? If it's not the smooth, clean prose everyone else has, if their presentation isn't as good looking, right? Whatever the object is that they're creating, they're going to feel that they missed an opportunity. If they use it to respond to a prompt for a class to help them out in their work so they can go and have fun with their friends, they feel guilt about that, right? Like, oh, I'm missing this opportunity to learn. I do think that is deeply connected with that question of value and talking about outputs, and we've probably overvalued output, right? This is a common thing I'm sure you're talking about, many other people are talking about, our sort of teaching learning response to thinking about generative AI has been, okay, well, let's get back to process. Let's get back to thinking about inputs and reflection on that process of how we put our inputs into whatever tools we're using, get away from that output object. And talk about that, right? I think there's some traps there as well, that much of the process can be automated. So how do we get students to value that process work, if that's what we're going to be looking at and thinking about, and feeling proud of the process, right? Innovative ways of prompting, let's say, or bringing together different sources. Finding interesting inputs, putting work into process, reflecting on that, being the object that they can feel proud of. Nonetheless, I think we assign like interesting meanings and values to objects all the time that could be slop or otherwise, right? We make meaning of them, share them with friends, talk about them, produce discourse around the outputs themselves. And as someone who's director for a writing program, I say, like, simultaneously, like, outputs matter, right? I very much in the writing to learn camp, with composition and writing instruction, that students are writing not necessarily to produce outputs, but to teach themselves something. You write an essay to figure out how you feel or think about something. The same's true with other objects that one creates as well. There's a lot of process oriented work, right? You're workshopping that, you're doing some drafting process, you're scaffolding it in pieces, thinking about changing that. But I don't want to give up on those outputs either, right? I do think that is there's value in looking at those final objects, even if they are a slog to get through and reading them at the end of the the term.
I think I'm seeing, I work at the high school level, and I work a lot with my English teachers. And I think what we're seeing from students is they really aren't being communicated to in the why. Why do we need to learn this? Like, why is it valuable to go through this if there's something that can do it so quickly for me? And that's the real challenge, because we are trying to steer the conversation in K-12 education is basically the knee-jerk reaction of how do we get them to not use this to cheat? And I don't think that's the conversation we really need to be having. So you talked a little about, there are some pitfalls to focusing on the process. Can you talk a little more about that? Like, when you're working with your writing students, how are you approaching that? Are you seeing the same kind of attitude from students at the college level? And how do you work with that?
Oh boy, yeah.
Solve my problem for me.
No, absolutely right. Um, I think we all feel that in some way, right? Like if you're going to put in a major amount of effort into doing something, there should be some reward if you're doing that. And there's another way of automating or doing that easier. Why wouldn't you use it? I understand that entirely. Um, yeah, I am. We are seeing that attitude. I think it might increase. Generally, our writing courses they're required. At Dartmouth, students have to take a first year writing class. Two of them actually back to back in a sequence. They still tend to be really enjoyed by the students. Now, maybe that's because they're not extremely difficult courses, right? They're a small class with an instructor who gets to know them. Maybe that's one of the reasons. So I don't see them really pushing back so much against the writing requirement yet. That may come down the road. I think there's a lot of resistance in other sites, other classes around writing, right? Like a class in government, a class in sociology, even maybe a history class where you go through a whole term of reading things and write a paper at the very end that you do in ideally a week, but most likely if one is writing this the old-fashioned manual way, right, like a day or two near the end. I think that's a situation where the students don't really understand why they're doing it. They don't have a motivated reader. The instructors are not signaling that they're paying attention to students. Frequently, those essays are never returned to the students. It's a stand-in for this is a rigorous course, right? So I think we've got lots of issues to think about assessment and the kinds of objects we want to use. Many conversations going on now about alternate assessments. I still think writing's important. I think you learn to write over a long time. That's something that you're working on for many years. I'm working on my own writing all the time, thinking about how to improve it, how to learn from other people. It's how I teach myself things. As I said, I think you sit down to write something, an essay in the Montaigne sense of a trial, an attempt to sort something out, think about an issue, work through it, revise it, and then hopefully at the end find that you've found an answer, at least a temporary answer to that problem. The focus on process entirely, I think, is a problem because it might get us away from those thinking twice, right? I do think we want at least a rethinking to be taking place, like revision in any field should be a like re-envisioning, right? Not merely a sort of editorial clean something up, but like reimagining, looking at a problem with new eyes. And I think sometimes if we were to get away from the longer extended bit of writing where a student's like working out a problem, thinks that they found a solution, then get some hard questions about, right? Well, why did you pick these things to focus on? Or why was this the conclusion from this? It doesn't seem obvious, right? That you've brought us from the evidence that you've assembled to the conclusion that you've reached. Then you like revise the whole thing, right? And rethink it. I do think maybe overemphasis on process will be an issue in producing that second thought, right? That sense of doubt about the initial correctness to understand that receiving feedback on writing and writing is not merely a summative activity, but formative, continually evolving, growing, expanding, changing shape. I think some of this hyper attention to process could be a problem in some of those situations. I think we might devalue the essay as an object of learning, right? Not to say there isn't learning in the earlier stages, but to go through it in its entirety, right? The process of writing an essay and then like rethinking it, that might do something different.
Jed, here's a question for you. So how does the special advisor to the provost for artificial intelligence at Dartmouth College keep up with all of this? Because as we're sitting here, something new was just posted about AI. Like, how are you tackling this assignment and this opportunity? Like, Renee, Sean, and I spend 8+ hours a day geeking out about it, and we're woefully behind.
Yeah, don't we all feel that way, right? It's hard. I try my best to stay on top of things, reading papers, talking about them with colleagues. I've been inviting a lot of people to campus. I take advantage of every opportunity to chat with people, like the invitation to come here on your podcast and chat with you and talk with others. It'd be really easy to get stuck in a certain way of thinking about the technology, right? And its limitations or applications, or just to stuck in our own environment here, right? And not be thinking about the broader consequences, the downstream, upstream stuff. So yeah, I am deeply concerned about what's going on in secondary schools. Our local high school, Hanover High, I heard from a colleague is using generative AI in the assessment of student work, and that this colleague was worried about that. And we had a conversation about that, thinking about, well, how are students coming in? Where are they going? I talk with our career services group at Dartmouth. We have an office of career and professional development. I chat with them about the kinds of careers that students are going into, talk with recently graduated students, think about like, oh, well, what are you using, right? What do you want to have learned more about? How do you think about the education that you had at Dartmouth, how that prepared you for this? What do we need to preserve from the things that we're doing? Trying to have lots of conversations. I read a lot. I'm an English professor, so my office is just stacked with books. I've got every book you could imagine on this topic, especially teaching and learning with AI right now is one of the most important pressing problems. I'm going to webinars, talking with colleagues, inviting people here, reading, trying to learn from our students too. They're in many ways far ahead of the faculty in this. So what are they doing? How do they feel about their use of it, about, again, what they want to preserve from what we're doing in higher ed and what might need to change?
Do you have any of those books? Do you have any you would recommend?
Maybe I recommend. I think there's many very, very good ones. I could send you some if you'd like. I think technology is changing, of course, rapidly. So how does one?
Right. Are there any you would recommend, like, as of April 11th?
Well, okay. So teaching with AI is the closest to me right now, sitting on the very top. This is José Antonio Bowen and C. Edward Watson, a practical guide to a new era of human learning. That's the closest to the top of the stack when reading. There's so much in this area. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find in your area, and I may have missed this because my internet went out, so forgive me if you guys already talked about this, but has Dartmouth committed to adopting a specific AI? I know colleges are doing that, like California was bringing that in, and here we have Champlain College in Burlington is partnering with Anthropic to bring Claude to the school. Is Dartmouth doing that? What do you think about that? Do you think that's a mistake?
Oh, yeah, another really big topic in decisions. So what we've done is we have an open source product called Open Web UI running locally that allows us to federate access to a bunch of commercial models. So we provide every member of our community with access to the latest OpenAI, Anthropic, Google models, as well as some locally running models, Llama and Mistral, French company. Those run on some local hardware, but we've set up a system that would provide kind of a front end portal to some of these tools. Let's do some messaging for students around policy related issues like, hey, don't send things out with personally identifiable information to some of these models, even though we're told that OpenAI is not going to train on it because this is API access to the GPT models through this Open Web UI application. We've been doing that. Our business school signed a 1-year agreement with OpenAI's Edu product. I'm not sure where they'll go in the future. We're thinking about that. I'm concerned about vendor lock-in with a single vendor, even if it is a leading player in that field. I think it's important for students to see that there are different applications and tools out there. We're evaluating some commercial versions of something like that Open Web UI that would give us some support. Once faculty start integrating activities in the classroom, we need to make sure that we can get someone like on the phone or via email quickly to make sure that they can fix a problem if there is one, and address that. Make sure we have like guaranteed uptime, things like that once it becomes mission critical to our teaching. So yeah, I think the future direction for us will probably be a commercial platform that will do the same thing, that will let us purchase tokens in a consumption model from some of the various commercial vendors and other open ones as well.
That's great. So here are some takeaways that I had, Jed, that you've phrased some things that we've talked about before in different ways for me that I'm going to hold on to. One of them is like the obvious connection to language. I've been saying large language model repeatedly over the last couple of months, but it never really clicked until you brought in the literary lens of that we're at a base level, we're talking about language here. The other thing that you brought in was the guilt if they do and the guilt if they don't. That's huge. That's huge. That's a big thing for us. I thought of like a Life is Good t-shirt when you started to talk about the process over the product. Like, let's talk about the journey a little bit. We're not doing that. That really stood out to me. I love the revision re-envisioning. I'm going to totally use that on some kid today, and they're going to be like, oh, okay. But is there anything else, if you had to leave something for people to take away from this conversation about thinking about AI that you would want them to have, what would that be?
Well, I think, I alternate back and forth between like pessimism and optimism. If I detach this conversation from other ongoing things, I can feel a little bit more optimistic, right? If we exclude the political context in the U.S. right now and just focus on this, I do have some optimism, around this, right? I think we've successfully managed to think about the changes and disruptions of technology in the past quite successfully in education. I think students are always going to come eager to learn. It may take them a while. We may struggle to figure out how to get them to use the tools and use them in ways that promotes the stuff that we're interested in. But as someone who studied literary history and history in the past, in that prior moments, I do think that we'll we'll find some solutions, and students will want to write, to think with each other, to share their way of experiencing the world with other people, to reflect on that. That's something that will continue. I think things will change, no doubt, right? But the core stuff that we have been doing will, I think, continue to be doing.
That's a great place. Renee, I was sitting here thinking we should introduce him to Adam.
Yeah, for sure.
Adam Sparks designed a product that interacts with writing and a little bit with AI, and he's got some of the same values and talks about things in the same way. It'd be really interesting.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you, Jed. And
thank you so much.
What we're going to do is I'm going to ask Renee to stop recording soon so I can ask you what really happened on Apollo 11.
Okay, thank you for having me.